This murder was dressed as a miracle. But what happened that night is a much, much larger scheme.
Stop! Here's what's gonna happen. Benoit freaking Blanc and I are gonna ask you all some questions, and you're gonna answer them. We're gonna get to the bottom of who killed Monsignor Wicks and why. And then... that's it!
Now, who wants to go first?
When we made the first one, it's not like we were thinking, planning a series or something, but I'd be lying if I said that in the back of my mind I didn't have the idea that, because these were kind of inspired by Agatha Christie, if it did well, we could keep making them in kind of the same way Agatha Christie tried something different with each one of her novels. We could continue it not as kind of just a series of doing a version of the same thing, but making a different style of murder mystery each time. So I did have that kind of, I probably didn't say it out loud, but I had in the back of my head. This one in particular, the first thing it actually started with was not a mystery book at all. It was the idea of, can I make a fun Benoit Blanc murder mystery that kind of examines the issue of faith in America right now. So in approaching the writing of these things, which is always the hardest part of them, and with this one, this was definitely the hardest script I've ever written. This was tough. But in approaching it, I'm a big outliner. I write very structurally, and so I'll spend the first 80% of the process just working in my little pocket-sized notebooks, just figuring out what the shape of the movie is going to be. And I don't start at the end with whodunit. I don't start at the beginning. I kind of don't start with that element of the mystery. I start very zoomed back, and I start with the very fundamental spine of what the actual story is going to be, and that's different than the mystery plot. The story being, who is your protagonist? What do they want? Why do we care? And why can't they get it? And how are they going to get it in the end in a way that we didn't see, that they didn't expect, and hopefully we didn't either. So it's the basic fundamentals of storytelling, and you kind of have to start with that. That's something that I learned very quickly writing these, that served me well with all of them, is remembering that clue gathering and the reveal of whodunit and all that fun, shiny mystery stuff. I mean, it's great. You have to work all that through on the surface, and you can figure all that out and make it make sense. But that's never going to actually engage an audience. And the only thing that's going to keep an audience in their seats, really, and give them, importantly, an emotional payoff at the end, is a character they care about and following that character all the way through a true story. I had Washington Irving on my mind a little bit, Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I had shot a TV show I made, Poker Face, in the Hudson River Valley, and gotten a sense of kind of the feel of it up there. So conceptually it made sense, and so the idea of being in a slightly remote, smaller little town, doing a small town mystery, which I love, and then the idea of having this kind of little set-aside church where you can limit the number of people in the parish, and that's going to give you your group of potential murderers. I don't know, but and you got creepy churchyards, you got primeval forests, you've got crypts in the middle of crazy glens.
This goes way beyond normal police work. This is something even I have not experienced. A perfectly impossible crime.
This case is solvable, right?
I'm incapable of not solving a crime. So you'll see. It's fun.
This movie almost follows like a more traditional murder mystery structure, which is, the first act, you meet all the suspects, get a pretty good idea who's going to get bumped off. They get bumped off into the first act, and then enter the detective to start solving it. So with the previous two films, I kind of done backflips in order to not do that. With this one, it kind of made sense to commit to that more traditional structure, mostly because that gave us the first act to really establish the conflict between Father Judd and Wicks, Josh Brolin's character, Monsignor Wicks, and to establish the flock and to establish kind of what Judd's conflict is, his interior conflict and what he's up against in the church, and to do it with the space to really truly lay the table, especially considering I knew the theme was going to be faith, and I didn't want it to feel like we were just kind of rushing to tag bases. I felt like I didn't want it to feel like it was shorthanding it. I wanted the audience to be able to truly kind of understand the lay of the land, because I knew once Benoit Blanc drops into it, then we're into the Benoit Blanc murder mystery game, and that was going to be a whole other energy that came in. So it made a lot of sense, even if it was slightly nerve-wracking, to leave that first act kind of clear for Father Judd to set things up. But it was much less nerve-wracking once we cast Josh O'Connor, and I thought, okay, I think we're going to be okay. I love actors, and so that's one among several reasons I hope we get to just keep making these things, is because to get to work with a new group like that. I mean, Glenn Close, talk about like a bucket list thing for me. At the same time, it still feels like a little miracle every time we finally close a deal and land somebody and lock somebody in for a part. And then as the ensemble builds and my eyes just get bigger and bigger seeing at this group that we've assembled, I don't know, it's kind of magic every time. And that's another kind of hidden benefit of this is, you know, when you have an ensemble of suspects and they're all played by movie stars, man, any one of them could be tossed in the paddy wagon at the end of the movie. The reality is, when I'm writing these things, I feel like I'm never trying to intentionally misdirect the audience. I swear, because it's not because I don't want, I don't want them to. It's because, first of all, I think I come into these things assuming the audience is smarter than me. So if I'm just trying to kind of like fool them with a clever little thing to make them look over here, they're going to see that instantly. So the only way that I know how to quote unquote misdirect the audience is to get them swept up in the actual story that I'm telling, get them worried about the main character so they're leaning forward, oh no, what's going to happen next to them, and or get them laughing and get them involved in the scene dramatically. Then their attention is on, then it's a roller coaster ride for them as opposed to a crossword puzzle. And then they're going to get swept along, and then nobody is better at misdirecting an audience than themselves. I never have to plant any red herrings. I never have to do any tricky little things to try and lead them down false paths. I kind of just get to kind of lay it all out relatively straight, and then after the screening, the stuff that audience members come up to me and said, oh, halfway through, I thought that this was going to happen. I'm like, I never in a million years would have ever thought of that, and that's amazing. Try and set up, all the clues, but I never really deliberately try and mislead the audience. I'm not smart enough for that. This was a really, really tough script to write, and what that translated to was a lot of drafts of it and a lot of discarded drafts. And I think I have a folder on my desktop with like 8 completely different versions of the first act. The first act with any movie is always the thing you sweat the most, and in these movies, you're laying so much groundwork. You're introducing all of the suspects. You're getting to know the main character. You're setting up the crime. There's so much intricacy to it, while also trying to lay the foundation for the emotional payoff of this movie, which was really important to me. That it wasn't just a clever puzzle, but at the end we are really going to land it in an emotional place. And that relies on the beginning setting that up. If the ending falls flat, it's usually because the beginning didn't do its job. So there are a lot of different blind alleys I went down in terms of writing, especially in that first act. But that's writing. Any writer will tell you, you just get in there with a machete and bang your head against the wall and pick your tortured metaphor.
The spirit really moved him today, huh?
There were plenty of characters, and there was the character Lee, who was a sci-fi writer. At some point, he had a teenage daughter who I had kind of used to channel, because I was a teenage Christian, and I know there's the surety of a teenager in terms of their moral point of view, backed by the notion that God and the universe is on your side. I definitely had that when I was a teenager, and so that was me kind of getting to channel all that into a character. But it was just one too many pieces in there. And then there was much more having to do in the opening initially with the notion of the family fortune with Prentice. There were different versions of the backstory with Grace that were sometimes much more elaborate. So yeah, there were several characters that kind of fell by the wayside. There are deleted scenes. There's some great stuff on the cutting room floor actually, and yeah, I mean, the one thing we can't really do with these movies in the edit that you can do in other genres is do a lot of swapping around. Like sometimes you get in the edit and it's like, oh, this sequence at the end of Act 2 that would actually play at the beginning of Act 2, but you know, that is kind of off the table with these movies because they're a bit like jigsaw puzzles. But it's always shocking for Bob Doucet and I, my editor, for us to get in there and realize what we can cut. And we're always trying to cut it down. I tend to be really ruthless. Yeah, there was a whole kind of investigatory scene at Andrew Scott's house that involved like the origin of the murder weapon. That was a fantastic scene, and it just happened to kind of land right in the middle of our second act when we kind of had to just keep things going. And so that's one thing where we did end up taking elements of that and repurposing them earlier in the movie in Andrew Scott's introduction. And actually ended up, because the scene as it played originally had Mila and Daniel standing in the background, and we actually painted them out and repurposed it in his intro. So that's the kind of thing that if you get really creative, you can do. And it's also, it's you know, I mean, Andrew's fantastic in the movie, and yeah, if somehow he ends up watching this, I feel very sorry that we had to cut this, but I think it does make the whole stronger, and because of that, it even makes his character stronger.